Big Brown Gadfly. For this edition, I bring to you an interview that I had with Tracy Shannon, who's the Texas Director of Mass Resistance, and I had the honor and privilege of going to Austin to lobby with her the week of March 8th. Now, we got into this interview to discuss a drama that we see repeated again and again, where we want to go and help a community that is trying to deal with some of these dangerous policies affecting their families. And it just seems that sometimes it always goes wrong. The question is, why do drag queens always win? Why does Drag Queen Story Hour always seem to win? I made this 1 minute TikTok video to express everything that goes wrong in 1 minute, and then you can have 40 minutes of an interview with Tracy.
People ask me, how does this happen? How is it that this transgender stuff gets in all the schools and nothing ever gets done about it? Well, here, let me tell you a little bit of a story. Please, tell me all about it. I want to hear about how the big bad LGBTs can take over our culture. I work in a library, but my gym has always been a bit fabulous, so I'm going to bring a drag queen to talk to a bunch of 4-year-olds about anal sex. Not in my town, not to my kids. Bring in mass resistance. Hello, I'm here for mass resistance. We're here to protest. We're going to shut down Drag Queen Story Hour. We're a proven activist group, and I can get tons of moms here on the steps of City Hall to boycott unless this gets taken care of. That is such a good idea. Here come the activists. We're going to stop this. We're going to shut that Drag Queen Story Hour down. You can't take away my dreams. I was going to bring those drag queens here. You'll see, I'm going to call it GLAD. Hello, this is the Human Rights Campaign. Yes, we can definitely get there. And just remember that mass resistance is listed as a hate group. Imagine what all those moms are going to say when they find out. They're going to get boycotted, harassed, blacklisted, deplatformed. No, not deplatformed, please. They gave my business a terrible Yelp review. They won't talk to my kids. They're not getting invited to birthday parties anymore. Somebody stop this from happening. Headlines, recruiting opportunities. I see it. It's going to work. I'm going to get TPUSA or maybe Dennis Prager, somebody to come in who will be able to sell the outrage without picking up all of this bigotry. Okay, forget about it. You can have your Drag Queen Story Hour, but Candace Owens is selling a book down the block. It's so much better. We get inspiration without any of the problems. Hi, I came for the protest. I guess nobody showed up. People ask me, how does this happen?
Welcome to the Big Brown Gadfly, where we give a hard time to people who need to be given a hard time, just like Socrates' horse. And my guest tonight is Tracy Shannon. She is the director of Mass Resistance Texas, and we have been through some trenches together over the last week, but there's been more that she has been through that I haven't been able to stand by her with. I couldn't be there when she had some battles, and I'm going to ask her to update us on what it's like being in the trenches fighting for pro-family causes. Just as a reminder, Mass Resistance is a group of citizen activists, parents, people out there in the community. I would not describe us as a classic partisan group. I don't think that Mass Resistance is a Republican club. It's definitely not like most Republican clubs. It's people who are trying to fight for basic decency and to fight for the survival of their family's values against the encroachment of so many different corrupting ideologies that come through libraries and schools and their workplaces. So Mass Resistance does things like they actually get out there and they stop Drag Queen Story Hour. They stand out there and they protest, and there's people who are in the trenches. And I went with Tracy to Austin last week, and we were lobbying for a lot of the policies at the state legislature level that we feel need to get done. And it's an uphill battle, but we're still chugging along. We're trying to do our best. But as we left Austin, Tracy then went to a town in Texas known as Leander. That's the name of the city, and Cedar Park, which are neighboring suburbs of Austin. Is that correct, Tracy?
That's right.
Okay, so I want you to tell us first, what is the battle in Leander and in Cedar Park? And then let's just have a frank discussion about why so often when we're there and we're trying to help communities, sometimes we're not just fighting the leftists, we're also fighting the very people that asked us for help. It's kind of sad, but we're going to have a frank discussion about that. But first, set the map for us. Set the stage. What is going on in Leander and Cedar Park, and why did you go there at the end of last week?
So what's happening in Leander and Cedar Park? Leander ISD encompasses Cedar Park too. It's a very large school district with several schools, and there's been some obscene material on the reading list in the high schools. And some of those, like Beyond Magenta, In the Dream House, and Lolita. These are all books that have obscene stuff in there, even scenarios involving children as young as 6 years old engaged in sexual acts. Now, these are not appropriate reading materials for our young students or even our high school students. So some moms bravely stood up and have been fighting this. And I'm told for like 9 months they've been fighting this.
Now, were these assignments from specific instructors, or was this district wide?
This is for high school English, so they have some reading assignments the kids can choose from the list, and on those lists, and I would assume if it's like most high schools, the English department had, and they had a meeting and chose the books. Probably they weren't very well reviewed. Probably they didn't read everything in there. That's a problem, but more than likely some teacher thought that these were good things to insert as choices because they wanted to be inclusive or representative of trans people, because one of the books is about trans ideology. I have no idea what they would put in the dream house. That's completely inappropriate. There's other books that can definitely, get kids thinking about, various scenarios and trials and tribulations without inserting the grotesque, two women using strap-on dildo together, which is what's in the dream house.
That's in that book?
Yes.
So
it describes it in great detail and very crude and vulgar language, using words such as CUNT and
these are students who are in 11th grade, 10th grade?
Yeah, in high school English.
Oh my goodness. So this is at the level of Shades of Grey.
Yeah, I mean, it's really gross, and it's salacious, prurient material that shouldn't be in the hands of minors. Really, anyone who gets their kicks out of reading this, something's wrong with them.
Right.
This is very deviant.
Right. Now, I can tell you as a former English professor for 20 years that the people in the field of English are going to say, well, it was optional. They didn't have to pick that. Although what I would say in this case, especially given the age range, is that the existence of the books on the list would then create a tense learning environment, because there are the kind of students that are going to pick those books are probably going to be students that are going to pressure their peers to talk about it and to discuss it and to even experiment with some of the things in it. So I agree with you that I don't think it's appropriate. That's something that could exist possibly at the college level.
Right, where there's a little bit more maturity and understanding that people are different than you, and that you don't force your view, like your sexuality on them. I mean, in college, normally there are circumstances where it happens, but normally you wouldn't tolerate somebody, forcing this obscene material in your face like that. But in high school, these kids don't even know how to stand up for themselves. They're getting this material and probably being shocked by it. I know the parents seem to be shocked. I learned of it through a video that was posted on Facebook, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go down there to that school. They need to be that district needs to be protested. That's how I decided. I do know people in Cedar Park. I have friends in Cedar Park and in Leander, and they didn't ask me to go. I don't have to be invited to go protest. I mean, This is national resistance Texas, and anywhere that we have concerns for children, and then I learned this was going on for 9 months. I'm like, oh my gosh, somebody there did mention to this local parent group for Leander ISD. Not sure what the specific name of the group is, but someone did say we should get the help of Tracy Shannon with Mass Resistance, and a few other names and other groups came up, and they were all, no, we've been working on this 9 months, and we don't want someone coming in at the last minute. And then it turned to like, I'm not going there to take credit for any of their good work, not at all. I think the district is doing some of the right things. They are reviewing the 6 books. They've stopped the reading assignments until everything gets reviewed. And who knows what the final outcome will be. For me, that's not enough, okay? Somebody needs to be fired who brought those books in. And anyone who didn't take a stand, only 2 people on that school board even, spoke out publicly and said they're against this kind of material being in the schools. The rest were silent. Why? Because they want to protect themselves and from criticism, because apparently you're some kind of a bigot and a hater if you don't want kids to be sexually groomed in your public schools. So some people didn't have the guts. Those people need to be recalled or voted out as soon as possible. And so that's why I'm going there, because mass resistance has a bigger focus than just Leander or Cedar Park. Mass resistance Texas is focused on all of Texas, where children are being sexually indoctrinated and groomed. And we're trying at the legislative level to stop this by repealing the obscenity exemption in the penal code. And so of course we want to bring attention to what's happening in our districts. We want the public to know, because so many of the public is just in shock when they find out that these books are in their in their schools. They think they love their neighbors. They have great neighbors. They may even think they live in a conservative community in a great small town. But by the way, do you know who's on the school boards? They're not always people who share your values. And there's been a huge movement in Texas to get liberals on the school boards. And the people in the classrooms, and I'm not saying all teachers are like this or even realize what's going on. They don't even realize that a teacher doesn't know what's going on in the other classrooms, right? And
well,
they don't even realize they're participating in grooming.
Yeah, you have large national organizations that dictate the templates to these local communities. So the field of English, there are associations of the educator associations and teaching guilds. There's things like the 4Cs, which is the Association for Composition Teachers. There's the MLA. These are the places that you would go to for conferences when you're in grad school, which is what most of these teachers had to do. They had to go to grad school to get teaching certificates. So a lot of times you have lists of books or lists of lesson plans, and they're provided from this elite at the top, and it's provided across the country. And so accountability for these things is really hard to nail down, because somebody will say, well, I didn't realize that those books were there. We're just abiding by the published guidelines of some other association, right? And then you go to that association and they say, well, these were the things that were based on peer review. So they just keep on kicking the accountability, the blame from one person to another, and you can't really nail it down. But what you do know is that your kid is going to school, and even at a time when we have spent so much discussion on sexual harassment and why it's wrong to create an unhealthy hypersexual environment at school or work, and that's part of what the Me Too movement was about. Despite all of that, you're having your kids who go to school and are being put under a lot of sexual pressure, because this affects the peer relations of the kids in the school. And it's not necessary to have that kind of content given what skill sets you're trying to give kids in high school. It's not necessary to introduce them to a whole bunch of sexual narratives that aren't really part of classic world literature. They're not teaching them really valuable things about history. It's not going to help them with their writing. It really is just part of this larger project of adults who have taken over many of these educational associations, who really have a belief that it is their business what goes on in the sexual fantasies of teenagers. And there's something really unhealthy that's driving the whole thing, which is, I don't understand why the people who are setting these lists are so obsessed with what teenagers are thinking about sexually. Well,
those are the groups that are, they're very progressive. They're the same people who think that, kids have sexual rights and that kids have, can enjoy sex at very young ages. That's what's, coming down from the top. And maybe the teachers don't know that's the ideology being passed down, but that is the bigger ideology. And the local people think you have local control. But what we really have is these larger non-governmental organizations that are controlling us at the local level instead. Because we need to get more involved and push back against this grotesque ideology. The sexual stuff is just one thing, and then you have your other political stuff, like the critical race theory that's being espoused in the public schools as well, and is very harmful to the children.
Right. Okay, so this is the basic battle line. I think most people can associate with this. They can relate because they've seen this happen in their community. And then where does the problem start? When you get there, you're trying to back up these parents. I assume that a lot of these moms agree with you about the content and about how the content shouldn't be there. How did you end up getting into an argument with other people who share your opinion?
Well, I haven't had a direct argument with any of them because they don't have the guts to contact me and ask me any questions or express their opinion to me. Instead, they gossip at the local level and harass their neighbors, some of whom are friends of mine. They accuse them of recruiting for mass resistance. And I'd like to say, what's wrong with recruiting for mass resistance? I'm a mom, I'm a grandmother, and I recruit for mass resistance. A lot of my friends recruit for mass resistance that I work with. You recruit for mass resistance.
Yeah, we need all the help we can get. I mean, we're fighting a lot of battles for these folks. That just doesn't...
But they're calling us a hate group because of the Southern Poverty Law Center. They don't, they will carry that libelous slander, around without even talking to us, without getting to know what we're about. We're about the same things they are. We're a little bit more vocal about it. We talk exactly. I mean, one of the mothers that stood against us brought an actual strap-on dildo and showed it to the board at the board meeting. I mean, she should be with mass resistance. That's something that we would do to make a point, to help them visualize. I mean, they're no different than we are. We just got labeled because we're effective. We've been around for like 25 years or more. So we got the label. Why? Because we don't believe in same-sex marriage, and we've said it out loud. And because we have investigated and exposed the anti-bullying programs to be pushing LGBTQ propaganda to young children. And because we said that, SPLC wrongfully called us a hate group and said that we're for bullying. We're not for bullying. I haven't ever met anyone in 17 years working with mass resistance that hated anybody in the LGBT community who wanted to any kind of bullying to go on.
Yeah, we're not going out trying to insert ourselves into the lives of gay individuals. We're trying to address systemic problems like the list of priorities that we brought to Austin. We want someone in society, such as the state legislature, to intervene so that we don't have this culture of harassment in schools. And that's what it is. This sex ed and all these LGBT programs, it's creating an environment of harassment. It's creating a hostile learning environment because students who have to go to school are going to school, and they're having to suffer a lot of speculation from their peers about their sexuality, a lot of pressure to become sexually active or to discuss sexual things that make them uncomfortable. And if they, in a same-sex situation, you don't have the same safeguards that you have in heterosexual situations. So boys that are having to deal with boys in their class that are making passes at them, or girls who are dealing with girls making passes at them, or anybody dealing with trans students, classmates making passes at them, you don't really feel like you can speak out about it. You don't really feel like you can ask the authorities at the school to intervene, because that is seen as discrimination against LGBTs, because the LGBT movement has made it so that their very basic political right, the thing that most galvanizes them as a group, is a right to constantly force other people to hear about their sex lives. That's what the movement is fighting. So that's what we're fighting. And what frustrates me, because I know exactly the dynamic that you're talking about. I dealt with this in several different communities in Texas, where you have these moms who are learning the lesson that mass resistance learned decades ago about what happens when this sexual culture invades places that are too delicate and too fragile to deal with it. And all of a sudden it gets into communities and your kids are experiencing harms. They're uncomfortable, they're depressed, they're anxious, they're vulnerable to harassment and grooming and assault and all of these things. And it tears apart families. So people in communities see that, and then they want activists to come in and to fight against it, but they somehow want to just not have to deal with all of the threats and all of the bullying from the LGBT lobby or whatever left-wing lobby. They want to find some neat, clean, polite way of turning this back. And I mean, we're always polite, Tracy. I don't think that I've ever seen you be rude or unnecessarily aggressive to people, but there's just no gentle way of doing it, right?
No, you have to be blunt. I
Yeah.
am blunt, and I do make, I will say that I do call grooming. Some people are uncomfortable with that, but to me, that's the best way to describe what's going on in our schools, whether it's intentional or not. I think a lot of it, people are doing, they have good intentions. They've been told that there needs to be representation. They've been told, that there needs to be inclusivity and diversity and, just that kids should have a choice, right? But some things aren't good choices, and they shouldn't be promoted to children, like these pornographic reading assignments, and critical race theory that makes kids feel like outsiders or makes other kids feel guilty, like they've done something wrong, when all they've done is get up and put on their pants like everybody else and go to school.
Right.
And it's just not fair to, be categorizing everybody in the ways they do. And it's not okay to be, telling kids how to think and feel. We need to teach kids, how to think analytically and critically, instead of telling kids what to think about everything. And that's what's happening in our public schools. It's just simply not okay. And these community members that are upset that they're like, they don't want to stand with me. Fine, don't stand with me. Get out of my way. I know how to do this. And it wouldn't take me 9 months to get 6 books removed. And I would,
Right.
we would have some results. There would be some people being recalled. And that's why I'm going there, to speak to the members of the community and to raise the awareness, to our legislators. That's why I had a press conference, because I want to get this out to our legislators, like, hey, this is happening in small towns in Texas. It's not just Austin, Texas, where they celebrate Pride Week for an entire week and take the kids on buses to the Pride Parade. No, it's in the small towns where people tried to get away from the craziness, in Austin.
Right. Yeah, and I think what's sad is that the people on our side, a lot of these activists on our side, they do get involved in so much of this blacklisting. Cancel culture, it extends all the way to the people who are on the right-wing side. I saw it firsthand when we were in Austin. Tracy and I went to the State House, and we were going from office to office, and we had recruited volunteers to help us to lobby. And I was there when there was a lawyer who works with one of the bigger pro-family organizations. She didn't realize that she was on speakerphone on the cell phone, and she immediately asked, "Who are you?" when she heard my voice in the background. And I told her my name, and she said, "What group are you with?" And I said, "Well, I'm up here with Mass Resistance." And then immediately what she said, and I heard it because she was on speakerphone, she said to our friend, "I need to speak alone with you." And then, I mean, this is right in front of me. And the woman walks off to the side, and then she comes back and she says, "Well, the lawyer told me to, basically not help you, not work with you because we're bad, we're tainted, and I just think that is wrong. It's not Christian, certainly. So all these groups that behave that way and call themselves Christian, it's not appropriate. It's also it's self-destructive. What happened?
Yeah, it's carrying gossip, and
Right.
it's committing false witness against a neighbor is what it is. And a lot of these same people think they're Christian, right? But that's not a Christian thing to do. I don't go around saying not to work with other groups. I work with whoever you want to, but don't be slandering my group and my work, because I haven't done anything wrong.
Yeah, it's sad because ultimately what ends up happening is we get the gridlock. Whenever it's the people on our side who are telling us to stay within these very narrow limits, those limits were set by the people who created the status quo, who want the status quo to continue, who basically at the most want them to put these 6 books maybe with an asterisk next to them and then put them on some separate list, but they don't want to go any further than that. And what I find is that often these parents in Texas who call up activist groups to come help, they very often, they just want the problem to be fixed at their kids' school. That's what I've noticed. They don't want to be involved with anything outside of their school. They see that all as a hassle. I went through the same thing with the moms with their secret Facebook groups. I don't know if you've had this experience, but I would have one mom who was in the Facebook group who was seeing the posts, and the moms would be posting to each other on these secret Facebook groups about how be very careful of mass resistance, don't get them involved, don't blah, 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 all of that stuff.
Right. And we have the same, we all have want the same things. It's like, well, oh, I'm so sorry that I care about kids. What kind of person wants to try to stop someone from protecting kids? I don't get it. I mean, you either want to protect them or you don't. And mass resistance knows what we're doing. And you know what? I'm fine with doing the dirty work. I'm fine with being the one that the people don't like, but that they say is too aggressive. Because we get things done. If you want to be the quiet type, that works behind the scenes, that's fine. You can do that. But don't tell people they can't work with me, because, that's just the kind of spirit we're trying to fight, right? And Leander and Cedar Park, there's people who've been doing mean things to other citizens who are speaking out against this, just like they did mean things to citizens who spoke out against Drag Queen Story over there. I mean, one of the moms who spoke out received some harassing mail. It was like penises, like cartoon-shaped penises, and it had some just obscene language on it, and it was really gross. And that's harassment. And by their own neighbors who are, just want to protect kids. For what? Because they spoke out and said, a book with this kind of perversion is not right for kids. I don't know why we can't agree that a high schooler shouldn't be reading a book that describes 2 lesbians using a strap-on dildo together. What's so hard about that?
Yeah,
what is so hateful and scary about that?
Well, and it's not necessary for the school to be involved with this. It's amazing how they're going to say it's hateful and scary for you to object to it, not calling it hateful and scary that book is in the reading list. That's
it's very disrespectful to the children of that school and to the parents who attend there to put that there as if that's an appropriate choice for the kids.
Right. And again, it's just... I just remember when I was in high school, and I was going through a lot of this because I had a lot of sexual issues when I was in high school. I think it would have made it so much worse if my teachers were involved. If this was something that my teachers were dragged, and then having certain parts of the sexual discussion getting the approval of teachers and other parts not, that would have made things so much worse. And
yeah, I think so. I mean, and it's really inappropriate, for an adult to be kind of weighing in on the sexuality of young people. It's crossing some kind of a line that's really creepy there. And
I think creepy is the best word, because it even if it doesn't involve trying to seduce a young person into sexual contact, it comes from the same source as basically pedophilia. It's this this need to project upon a young person your sexual fantasies, when the young person, the only reason why that young person is in your orbit is because they're vulnerable, they're at an earlier stage of life, and they're there to be trained by you for professional reasons, and you're bringing sex into it. It would be the same thing as getting your first job in high school, and your job is to flip burgers, and your boss at the burger joint all of a sudden wants to turn this into him mentoring you sexually. You know what I'm saying? It's irrelevant to what the job is.
Right, and they should be not discussing that at all. In fact, Texas, we're not mandated to even have sex ed. The schools don't have to have that. Of course, here you have, discussions of a sexual nature in English class. And they're trying different ways to just bring all this stuff into other classes. You have math problems that, try to insert stuff about, different sexual identities in
Yeah.
the school and different scenarios. And that's really inappropriate grooming and brainwashing. It's the kids are feeling like they have to support and promote and endorse this.
And it doesn't, I mean, you're so vulnerable at that age. I mean, sex is such a loaded issue at that age.
And the surveys, most parents don't even know the surveys that are going on in the schools, which also influence the kids. You're taking a survey for kids who are 13, and they're asking them, how many sexual partners have you had? Have you had oral sex, or given it or received it? And asking all these things, how you identify, what gender do you identify with, and giving kids choices such as, transgender, non-binary, whatever. And these kids must be thinking, wow, there must be a lot of other kids that are, doing all these sexual things, and I need to identify as something, or I'm going to be identified as a bigot.
Right, and this is why I feel so passionately about what we were doing in Austin last week. This has to come from the state legislature. It can't come from Congress, because at the national level, the Democrats are just so much in power. It has to come from the Texas state legislature, because community by community, the effort is just too fractured. You can't. But there has to be a law that comes from the Texas state legislature that defines this as unlawful. It defines it as sexual harassment. For a kid to go into an English class in 10th grade, they're trying to learn how to read and write. They want to get some exposure to world literature, and they're having to discuss this. It not only does it take away from the time that they're spending on the actual subject matter, on top of it, they're uncomfortable. It's distracting. It can produce a lot of anxiety and depression, and it really compromises their social relationships with other kids in the classroom. And people talk about slut shaming, but I think prude shaming is a really big problem when this subject matter is introduced among young people, because I think kids that just don't want to be involved in talking about sex and aren't interested in starting sexual experimentation at that age are the ones that are being pressured more than the people who are very sexually active. So I don't understand. Remember all the talk about slut shaming? Why didn't we hear anything about prude shaming or pressure on girls to lose their virginity?
Right, and the kids who are don't participate in certain things are definitely being singled out in the school districts. They're sometimes made, if there's a program such as Drag Queen Story Hour, the one kid whose parents actually read the email, and takes the kid out of it, that kid's sitting up in the front office, right? And where everybody can see that they're left out. And even these activist groups act like if everyone does not participate, if every school and every child does not participate, then they're shaming online. They're shaming the elementary schools.
And this is what Me Too was about. That's rapey. That's rape culture. To say that I'm going to attack you if you don't make yourself sexually available to us. Whether it means discussion or actually having sex, to say, everyone has to let us get inside their head and draw them into uncomfortable sexual conversations, or else we're going to attack them. I mean, that's the attitude of a stalker or a rapist, or definitely a harasser, right?
Right. And since we've seen the trajectory of how this discussion is going from the radical trans activists, it's not even, you can't even have your identity, because you're too straight, right? So straight people should be willing to date and have sexual relations with, people who are trans identified. That's the new narrative. You're bigoted, you're a transphobic if you don't want to be with if you're a straight girl, but you don't accept a girl who's identifying as a male, as a dating partner. I mean, we're not even entitled now, according to their narrative, to make our own choices, and have our own sexual identity. I mean, so to allow these people to have any space in your children's head is just not acceptable. Parents need to stand up, and conservatives and Christians need to quit fighting amongst each other. If you don't like my approach, that's fine. Don't stand with me, but stay out of my way.
Right. Yeah. Well, listen, I do want to thank you very much for talking to me tonight. Also, we want to get an announcement out there about an event that's being organized by our very dear friend Kevin Witt. Do you have the details from that with you by any chance?
On the 18th, the thing on the 18th?
Yeah, that is going to be this Thursday, the 18th, right? Of March. And what is the location of it?
Let me look for that.
Yeah, he's having a panel discussion. Beverlyn Beatty's a very famous figure. She's a social media influencer. She's going to be there along with Jeff Younger, who's the father of James Younger in the famous Save James case. I'll be there, and there will be some other speakers and talking about the new sexual revolution. We'll be talking about all this. And
so it's 6 p.m.
Okay.
March 18th.
It's at 6 p.m. March 18th.
At 107 East Lamar Street in McKinney, Texas.
107 East Lamar Street in McKinney, Texas. I went out there to preach one Sunday in McKinney. It's a great town. You'll like it. And they have to pre-register, right?
Right.
What is the URL?
Pre-register. Yeah. I'll give the address real fast. www.sexualrev1.eventbrite.com.
Okay. And then there you can go. It's a free event, but you do have to register. Okay. So let me read back this website one more time. It's www. And let me read this out in military letters. It's going to be Sierra Echo X-Ray Uniform Alpha Lima Romeo Echo Victory the number 1.eventbrite.com. You should really sign up for that and go, because things are happening. People are gathering force, and we're going to start rolling this back. We're seeing that being rolled back in Poland, in Hungary, in Brazil. Now, finally, France is finally getting on the train to try to roll back a lot of these unhealthy sexual trends. And we need to push forward. Now, do you want to say anything also about your plea to start to call for a special session or an extension of the filing deadlines for the state legislature? We know that the gender transitioning for minors is going to be up for discussion. That has already been filed, so it's very important that the Texas state legislature does something on banning gender transitioning for minors. But there are a lot of other areas that now the door has closed on us because the filing deadline passed on March 12th. What can people do to try to get a lot more of these ideas under consideration at the legislature?
Well, they need to call or email their state representative and state senators, and also Dan Patrick and Governor Abbott, and ask for an extended session or a special session in order to consider some pro-family policies to protect children in public schools from sexual grooming, and to protect people from cancel culture, and depending what happens with House Bill 68, which everyone needs to call their state rep about House Bill 68 right now, email tonight. We need to have a hearing on that. You need to ask your representative to support House Bill 68, because it would make gender transition of minors child abuse. So that would end that problem in the state of Texas anyway. So not sure what's going to happen with that, but if Texans do not speak up, nothing will happen with that. And so we need to speak up.
Right.
And we do need to have a special session or extended filing date, and probably an extension of our session beyond the 6 months, because our legislature has taken so many vacation days this session. So, they need to put the work in that the public needs them to do. And this session, no more excuses. They need to pass some pro-family policy. And what we want to see before the next session is a pro-family caucus. The left has an LGBTQ caucus trying to pass all kinds of insane perversion. And we need to, be protecting children and safeguarding children and promoting families in Texas.
Right. Well, and this is the issue, is that there are so many ways that they run out the clock. And like you said, no more excuses. We don't want to take any more excuses. On the one hand, when I first got to Austin to lobby. I thought to myself, wow, what a great legislative session, because in 2017 they couldn't even pass the bathroom bill. 2019, all we got was that Chick-fil-A bill, which was protecting Chick-fil-A, which, as it turns out, was already discriminating against Christians, unbelievably, but that's what was happening. Mm-hmm. So I said, wow, oh my gosh, 2021, we have all of these bills up there. And then I realized, wait a minute, this is part of the game that they play with us. They don't throw us anything for 2 sessions, then they throw us a bone, and we're supposed to just completely be so grateful and reelect all of them. And that was why I took the approach, and I think Tracy took the same approach this year, where we're saying, no, this is not even the bare minimum. Just because we're coming from an abyss of complete negligence for session after session doesn't mean that something that's a little bit better than rock bottom is enough. You see what I'm saying, Tracy?
Right. I mean, we're not going to take a bone. We don't want scraps. We want Texas families to be protected. We want Texas children to be safeguarded in public schools. No more sexual grooming and no more indoctrination of our children in public schools. And there's just so much more. I mean, have a look at our, I think that our 16 legislative priorities are up on Mass Resistance website, www.massresistance.org. Check them out. We need to, and other states need to do the same. If you're not in Texas, you can do this in your state. Work with us. We'll tell you what to do. If we can do it while holding jobs and raising kids, then you can do it too. Yeah,
but they have come at us for 50 years of full frontal assault, and we have got to have a full frontal salvo against this. We have to be able to hit it on all.
Right, we wouldn't be where we are right now, if we had taken a really strong stance against all of this decades ago, but because we've been doing a little, waltz with and trying not to offend anybody, that's why now we're trying to protect children from being, sterilized, and boys from having their testicles cut off and girls from having their boobs cut off, when they're a little older. And that's why we got here. We have got to take a bold stand, and we cannot win if we are governed by fear.
Right.
And Christians don't put people on lists. Conservatives don't put people on lists.
Right. We got to all fight. All right. Great. Now, thank you so much, Tracy. And make sure that you get as many people as you can out for this Thursday event. And we will be back with another episode of Big Brown Gadfly very soon. Thank you.
All right.